Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for youth sports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics with a new installment of the Exit Meeting Series. This week, we are taking our talents to the nation's capital, to talk a little Carleton Ravens football, and we have an extremely awesome guest join us. You know, if you're watching, you can see his face there. You know from the intro title card, but Tom, the responsibility, the honor is all yours. So how the heck are you doing, my friend Tom?
Could not be doing any better, my man. We are here with a legend of the game. He's a two-time Grey Cup champion, a two-time Yates Cup champion, a Vanier Cup champion, and now the head coach for the winning Panda Bowl championship. The first time in Carleton Ravens history, well, in the last 8 to 10 years here. You've got head coach Corey Grant from the Carleton Ravens here. Coach, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. Appreciate you guys having me on. This is exciting. The only thing I'm going to have to say to Zach is, because I'm looking at your background, unlike mine, thank you. You needed your chair's in the way. You needed to move a little bit better to the other way. Yeah, I like how you were moving probably to your right to cover that other logo. Yeah, yep. And then showing off the good one.
No, this is good. This works for me, Coach. You know, it was only in fairness that I was going to be only in fairness, I was going to be blocking both Ottawa teams' logos on that one. But, you know, Tom already set it up. I mean, October 5th, 2025, the long-awaited moment that fans, football fans across the country, arguably across the continent, have all been waiting for, which is At the 55, made it out to the Panda game finally. And what happens? Coach, you win the game. Is it a coincidence? Probably not, but we're going to take some credit for it. Still waiting for our share of that Panda Championship in the mail for making it out. But like, all joking aside, let's start there, because we've talked with enough people from Carleton football, Ottawa football over the 8 so years we've been doing this to know that that game in itself, you could arguably throw out how so much of the rest of the season goes, that is bragging rights in that city. It means as much as anything else. Take us back to that moment, October 5th, 2025.
Yeah, it was. I think you guys had a little bit to do with it also, that you were there. So we'll take you back this coming fall. I think, for myself, being there, being at Carleton, and understanding how important this game was. Right, even when I interviewed for the job, it's about winning the game, and we hadn't won in so many years before that. And even for me, we hadn't won my last few years, and then to win it this year, and it was a tough battle. And I always say, it doesn't matter what our records are. It doesn't matter where we are in the standings. This year, it had a lot to do with where we needed to be and where we wanted to go. You throw that all aside, the rivalry, the guys playing in the city that know each other, and we know each other well. To go out there and win this one, you know what, for our program, it was big. I realized afterwards, and even up until this day, even for the student body, some of them had never run onto the field winning that game. So that was a great thing for the student body, our athletic department, and even for some of our alumni that came in with me. I talked to a few guys just a couple of days ago, and over past it, they were a little envious of the guys that had won that game, because they'd worked so hard to win it, and they saw how emotional, how great it was just for everybody in the stands for cheering for Carleton, that they want to be a part of that. And like I told those guys, you know what? You helped build that foundation to get to that, and you really put us on that path to win that game. Now you've set that now for our guys to continue to carry that along and continue with the W's in that game.
Certainly. Well, while we're out there and in the stands, we see some of the Carleton greats. We see Kasim Ferdinand that's up in the stands, and he's celebrating with everybody and whatnot. But even as somebody like yourself, obviously an incredible playing career, both at Laurier and the CFL, playing in front of CFL crowds, to go into that, and I know it's been a number of years now, but to see that entire stadium loaded with fans, sold out, just like a CFL game. And at points, Zach and I are in one of the end zones here, essentially right on the field. And when they're cheering, both sides are cheering, you can barely hear anything. Now, I think some of the fans in the stands need to understand that, when you have the ball, Carleton fans need to quiet down a little bit and things. There were sometimes coming to that, but just the atmosphere itself, watching the fans rush the field afterwards, seeing some of your guys like Elijah Barnes as he comes up to us asking, hey, can I get a photograph? Can I get an autograph? And just seeing ultimately our dream, which is to see youth sports athletes being treated like the outstanding athletes that they are in this big space. What is this game? What did this game mean for you specifically as the head coach? You know how much it means to the alumni, to the program, and everything. But to get this win, probably one of the most significant wins in your tenure in here. Like, what does that mean to you? Obviously, within this the Ottawa space.
Yeah, it was great, right? Like, I'll say this. First of all, Ottawa's a great team. They're coached by my former coach and doing those things. So much respect for what they do and what Coach Marcel, Coach Belfay does over there with those guys. And for us as a football program and for myself, it's one of those things where you don't, at the beginning of training camp, talk about that game because in the end, it is one game. But we understand how big it is, right? And then you hear alumni, everybody's there, and the kids in the stands, and you realize how big it is, but you don't really realize it until it's done, and you're like, you know what, this is big. And then for myself, as the head coach, you're like, you work for those moments and those big moments in your program that you can sort of not sell, but talk to recruits about. Talk to alumni about, and making sure you're getting that support, that we're going in the right direction and we're building what we need to build. That game was a big one. We hadn't won, like, obviously my tenure, and then it might have been 6 to 8 or 10 years, whatever it was, that many years. And to see how important it is important for a program to start, using that as a building block, as winning in those big games, playing in those big moments. And then you can sort of leverage those things when you're talking to your guys about, hey, yes, that's one game, how big a game that is. Now we're, thinking about the playoffs and those type of games. And when you get in those bigger games, you're realizing we can play in these games, but we got to make sure we're doing the things in those building blocks in between so we can play in more of those games and it's not just once a year.
And I'm curious just from your perspective, because obviously with last year being the first time in a number of years that the programs won the Panda and it didn't correlate with a year making the playoffs, but your experience just playing at the highest of levels of football here in Canada and being in some of the most high leverage games, is that the type of environment that you can leverage amongst your players to be able to say, like, for the example where you have a young group with you who many of whom that core that's going to make up the success of this team next year, and we'll get to who those great athletes are, where you might be able to look at them and almost regardless of how the Panda game goes in this upcoming season, if you're in a quarterfinal matchup, you can look to that group and say, guys, hold on, let's go back a year. Like, what it's like to be in an environment where, yes, we have thousands of our own fans, but in many ways, that's a hostile environment. It's honestly going to be more chaotic than anything that we're going to face. Like, does that seem like something that'll translate, or maybe in your conversations with your former coach and Coach Belfay, is that something where you guys just secretly have this major advantage in being able to have arguably the highest, no, not arguably, I think aside from maybe a Laval-Montreal playoff, or probably regular season game, the most high intensity, high leverage regular season matchup two teams could have?
Yeah, you're always, as a coach, you're always looking at different ways that you can sort of motivate your players. And then you get into certain games, you're like, okay, I got to bring them down here. You want to bring them up here. And you can really sometimes, and as you say that as a coach, you're always looking for moments. Right. And those are moments that you can draw back on at different times during out the year, different times of training, different games and doing those things. So that game there is like one of those ones where, okay, you can play in front of whatever, 20,000 plus people, right? Everything's on the line. You know how big it is to the community and to your university. And as you're drawing on those and how you prepared for that game, making sure you're not changing because it's that game, but that's how you prepare all the time. Right. So you're always using those moments and you're taking them little by little. And even for myself as a coach within those moments, you do get caught up. Right. And, even for us at the end of the game, I'm looking for a stop from the defense and they're marching down the field and they're getting to the Hail Mary. And you've went through those scenarios in practice because we go over them every single week for the last 3-4 years. But then you actually get into them in a game and you're like, are your guys prepared? Have you prepared them enough for those moments to knock it down? What those jump balls look like in those different scenarios. So you always want to be leveraging those moments and hoping your guys are prepared for those moments, and you never know. So when you get in those games like that, and then hopefully you get in more big games and you can start, hey guys, this is like this. When you see this, this is what it is. When you bring them together on the sideline in a playoff game, hey, we've been here. This is what it looks like. This is what it'll feel like. It won't be something that they're shocked about like deers in a headlight, but more, this is what we do. We're used to this environment. We know how to handle ourselves. And the more times you can get your student athletes in those kind of environments and your coaching staff, then you can get them prepared for continued success year after year after year.
Yeah, and I think it's no mistake, obviously, with a number of combinations, but the teams that come out of Quebec and Laval and Montreal constantly are never really shaken by the lights or the stage because of the environments that they're playing in some of those big games. And I would say it's probably the same deal for you guys as well, playing in a large scale environment that's for the city itself. Like, who's going to own the city for the rest of the year? Stakes could not be higher unless there was a championship or a playoffs kind of tied to it. So it's an incredible atmosphere, and I'm sure something that all of your players from this past year will remember fondly. And I'm sure a number of them are working towards winning and getting back to in the years coming. But before we dive into the rest of the season here, obviously talking about the Carleton Ravens, one of the biggest topics that Zach and I are going over here is the quarterback battle that's happening. It seems on a week-to-week basis here. Now, you come out and you start with Tristan Lefebvre in the first week, and then you go to Elijah Barnes in that couple weeks, and then it's Lefebvre. But people looking at this from home are thinking, what, are they just flipping a coin between which quarterback? And no, that is obviously not the case. Yeah. But in the regular season here, especially, it's one thing to have training camp where you've got a couple of weeks, you can evaluate and whatever, but a week-to-week basis, what is your process looking like to who's going to start, who's going to play, what's the game plan going into this, and how did you come to, seeing Tristan start versus Elijah in some of these key games?
Yeah, it was they battled it out all of training camp, right? So we went through training camp. They both battled out a pretty decent training camp, and then when we came out of training camp, we went with sort of the more veteran guy of Tristan and giving him that next shot of doing that, knowing Elijah was ready to go. And it was one of those things, as you say, about flipping a coin. I don't know if it wasn't that for us, but it was, they were battling back and forth throughout camp. And we came out with Tristan to start the season. And for us as a coaching staff and myself as the head coach, it was like, who's going to grab the rein, right? Who's going to grab the rein and take this thing over, right? Both of them great leaders, both of them great quarterbacks in their own right. And we were looking for one of them to say, this is my job and nobody else is to take it. I'm going to do that. Like, we had the first game of the year against Toronto. Tristan came out, didn't play well. Elijah came in, did all right and got us going. And we said, okay, we'll come back out. I think the next week, I don't remember who it was, we played Waterloo the second week, and Elijah was the quarterback to go in. It wasn't one of his best games that he played against Waterloo. He played okay, but he didn't play his best game. I think the next week he did start, and we had Western. And after that game, we had some inconsistencies in that game against Western. So we decided, I think at the end of the game, we swapped up. Tristan went in, and then we just rolled with Tristan. And then Tristan went off that York game and record beyond record, right? And you're like, okay, go take it. And then he sort of I don't want to say slacked off, had a mishap. I think the next week it was against Guelph, and then went back and forth. So by the end of it, it was just one of those things like, okay, who's going to start? I think the Panda, we did all right there through the pick, and we went on from there, right? So it wasn't really a matter of going back and forth. We were, as a staff and myself as the head coach, was like, listen, I told them where it was at, needed both of their leadership in them, and said, which one of you is going to take it over, right? And then by the end of the season, the last game of the year, we had decided that we were going to go with Elijah with the Mac game. And if we ended up going any further, we had that discussion that he came in, I think, the second bit of the Laurier game. He played well in that. And then we were like, all right, you'll be the guy moving forward. It seems like you've taken more of a handle of it with the back end of the season. So it was just one of those things where we knew we had two starting quarterbacks, which some teams don't have one. We actually have, I think we really have 3 or 4 guys that could come out and start and play for us. And we just decided who's going to take over the reins. One of you have to really step up and do that piece. And they were both, battling back and forth, whether it was in practice and then in games. And then at the end, we decided to go with Elijah for that last game against Mac. And I think he stepped up and showed what he could do.
Well, you mentioned potentially being 3 deep. I don't remember what game it was. I think in Elijah's first proper year starting, when Tristan gets hurt in that opening week, where Zach George does come into the game. And I'm like, dang, you got another guy in here who is super talented. But I have to say, I am probably, and it's a small space of voices that, speak on U Sport football, OUA football. So within that already small space, probably one of the loudest voices in trumpeting Elijah, as in that year when Tristan goes down, I'm looking at the talent being like, oh my gosh, there's someone so special here. And just seeing like those kinks of like, well, he'll work him out because he's young and he'll get that experience. But then I'm curious because coming into this year, obviously, as you said, open battle. And I obviously, from both a former player, someone who coaches, respects that perspective of if it's close, maybe you give the edge to the veteran, you let him prove himself coming back off the injury. But how much, and this year, obviously, you had two new faces on the offense and defensive side with Coach Hilaire and with Coach Shakes, with Coach Griffith. How much of it was having a guy in Coach Griffith come in? And obviously, when he's at York, he's scouting Carleton for your matchups, but obviously in a much more looking at who's on your defense. And I can't wait to get to your defense because there's some guys, especially in that linebacking core and your secondary, that me and Tom are all over this year in loving. But how much of that is well played into the fact that you had a new offensive coordinator in, and obviously, like anyone taking on that kind of role, you want to say, well, I'm not going to throw out whatever happened before this year, but I'm coming in to evaluate what I have in front of me and see who is going to put us in the best position to have success. Did that play a role as well?
It does. Like Coach Nate and I, we talk, and we talk as a full staff, and the two of us talk, and we have those in-depth conversations of, okay, who do we like here? What do we have for this? What do we have for that? Who throws this better? Who runs sort of our quarterback run package better, and doing those different things. So we knew we would have those discussions, and him coming in as, the new offensive coordinator, getting a feel for both guys, and was like, oh, I like this, how Elijah throws this and he runs this, but TL runs this and he does this really well, right? So yeah, we would sit down, weekly and go, okay, what are we looking at? Who are we playing? What's our opponent? What do we like from this guy? What do we like from this? And doing those different things. And it wasn't just the quarterback position. It's just one of those positions. And I talk to those guys about it all the time. It's only really one of you that can play. But we have that discussion about who was going to play at O-line, who was going to play at receiver, who was going to play at running back. And then Coach Ron and I would have that exact same discussion about every other position on the defensive side of the ball, right? So we have those discussions as a staff, and then me sitting down with the coordinators and deciding what we thought was best going in week to week, and what 55 or 50 guys would give us the best chance or best opportunity to go out and perform, whether it was Sunday or we played on a Friday night or on a Saturday night.
Yeah, well, it was one of the processes and things that we like to do is Zach and I are going through and we're talking about, at the midpoint, who are the top 10 or top 11 quarterbacks that are in the OUA and kind of doing a ranking. And at one point in time, Zach and I look at each other and go, well, there's got to be a team that's left off because Carleton's got two and they're both should be in that top 10 ranking here. Yeah. So it's not as if it's like one guy's clearly a bum and the other guy's clearly this, like both of them are quality OUA starting quarterback caliber. So it's not like it's an easy decision here by any means.
Yeah. But, and I'll even with that, I'll even say that I think one of them, I don't know our stats off the top of our hand. I think we were one of the top passing teams in the country and in the OUA. Right. And I think, in our record book or something like that, however many we threw for, this was the first time in Carleton's history where I don't know if they threw for 2,000 each or something like that, where we had two quarterbacks throw for over 2,000 yards in the same season, right? So that's how neck and neck it was. Is didn't matter who was in there, we were going to be able to throw the biscuit around, around the park. And both of them, it was like their stats were here for yardage, 2,000 here and 2,000. I don't know who finished higher, maybe Elijah by 50 more yards than TL, right? So like you said, it's, sometimes people say if you don't have one, if you have two, you don't really have one. But I think with where we finished off throwing and passing and that part of things, we had two really quality quarterbacks in there.
Yeah, certainly. And one of the biggest assets for them, obviously both of them quality quarterbacks. Doesn't hurt when you're throwing to one of the most talented receiving cores that it was certainly within the conference, if not the country, just with guys like Hatchie and with guys like Tristan Reddy, obviously what they're doing, and everybody else in there. Going into the season, the easy thing is to say, "Oh, Kasim Ferdinand's no longer back. Like, what's this going to look like?" And then Tristan Reddy in particular just picks up like nothing else has happened. Hatchie is that solid receiver at any moment, it seems, when Reddy's got triple coverage. Yeah, just throw it up to Hatchie. He'll come down with it along with everybody else. But those two would just stick out to me in particular. What else can you say about the receiving core in particular that both these guys are throwing to?
They were top notch, right? Like there's a reason Tristan Reddy is now signed with the Argos. There's a reason why Fred got invited to the invitational and is on the radar of all CFL teams, right? It's to their work ethic and the time that they put in with both of those guys, right? It's funny because Tristan. TL, let's just call him TL because it made my life easier, right? TL, he worked with T Reddy and they lived together, so they had a good connection too, right? And Hashie's been growing up with them, but then you have Elijah there that worked with those guys too, right? Whether off season, during, after practice, before practice, to get that chemistry going, and they were top notch, right? And we'll be, I'm gonna miss Tristan a lot, and I'm gonna miss Fred if he does get drafted and moves on to the CFL because they are some not even. And I know even with the guys, we're talking about the quarterbacks and how great of players they are, they're great leaders, right? And that leadership piece between both the quarterbacks, I think after the York game, I hugged them and just said, guys, the reason we won this is because how you two have come together to get us better as a football team. And so losing T Reddy in that receiving core will hurt us. But just like when everybody thought Kasim was gone, who would be next? The next guy is ready to step up. And we do have some guys ready to go, and they're working their butts off right now. They know what the standard is within our receiving core, and I think they're ready to perform.
And you already brought up Kasim's name, and as far as the standard, like that is the bar. And it's interesting because you had, when it seems like this progression of Kasim's attracting all the attention, and so Tristan, as sort of that next man up, is able to kind of make a name for himself when there's less of a spotlight. And then when, you still had Hatchie with that team as well, and Brown. So again, all these other guys that were able to sort of have success off of the attention, the gravity of that one top player. And then going into last year, part of Tom and Maya's conversation was, okay, how is Tristan going to handle all of a sudden when he's the spotlight guy, and then all those next guys handle a little more attention? Obviously, Tristan stepped up tremendously. And obviously, as you alluded to, there's a chance that Frederick doesn't come back draft eligible.
Yeah.
And then you think about a young guy in Dante Spadaccini, who had some really nice plays in that York game. A couple of those, I think, jet sweep handoffs, taking one of the crib at least. In that world where Frederick's back, does it just kind of rinse, lather, repeat, where all of a sudden it's like, okay, Fred, now let's see how you handle being the guy. And Dante now becomes the man, where everyone's like, okay, Hachi's clearly the number one option for, again, whether it's TL or Elijah, and I don't have more hair to pull out on being on the Elijah bandwagon. I knew you're right there with me, Coach. I call this guy a future OUA MVP, so I have to stick to my take. But is that kind of, again, does that feel like what the offense is? I don't want to say hoping for, because obviously everyone hopes that Frederick is in the league, but there's what you hope for, and there's what you hope for. Is part of that continuity as a receiving core where a guy in Fred can go all the way back to connecting to being in a receiving room with a guy like Kasim. Like, how huge is that when that gets to just pass on and on to a young guy like Dante?
Yeah, that's great, right? And hopefully Fred listens to this, because I would love that. I would love for him to come back, and we've had our talks. So as soon as he listens to this, yes, Fred, I would love you back. And then, instead of me yelling at Tristan for not getting 1,000 yards, you could get 1,000 yards. Right? Whatever you'd like to do. No, but I hope he does get drafted and he goes and has a long, successful CFL career, and it will be the next person that steps up and that comes back. But if he does come back, you want to hope that leadership there, that people are going, okay, yes, they have Fred, but then who's that next guy? Because somebody else is going to have to really step into that role, right? And not sort of be that second guy, but be that guy when he's getting double teamed, who's going to make those plays, right? So you're hoping a guy like Dante. I think for us, it's nobody's secret. Like, we could possibly lose our top three receivers from last year, right?
Mhm.
And then a guy like Dante would have to then, with that leadership gone, would have to, step into that because I do think our receiving core was Tristan Reddy and then Hashi, and then it was actually Nick Sarkozy who took over
Mhm.
Kasim's spot, right, in the offense. And, Nick came in and nobody knew who he was, but he was making plays. I don't think he dropped the ball all year. He was a smaller target, but he would make plays, and do those things. And then it was Dante. So you're hoping, in the perfect world, Fred would come back and then Dante could learn from him. But if not, he's seen the work ethic of those guys. Those guys are still around the building. They're still working out as they prepare to move on. And now a young man like himself or Keegan Brunet, and we have some different guys, Nash McDonald. I know you're going to ask me about young guys that are coming up, but Nash McDonald was a big time recruit coming out, and he's seen from those guys of what's going on. And one of our unforeseen guys, even like Ben Huckabone coming
Mhm.
back as an old vet, very sure-handed, not the flashiest of guys, but a very steady-handed guy that's going to make plays. So we're hoping, guys will be able to step up into those roles, and whatever was left behind by those guys that have left can now take on that role in our offense in the receiving core.
Well, you talk about a guy that certainly when you're going into the game, especially in the last game of the regular season, going up against McMaster, doing all of our work, Tristan Reddy and Huckabone and Hatchie, and then Nash McDonald makes the greatest catch in the entire season on the sidelines, one-handed, pinned into his leg. Like, unbelievable. And Zach and I are looking at each other being like, how many receivers does Carleton have that are top
Yeah.
quality like this? So it's just an incredible testament to obviously the older generation that was there. I say older, like the fourth years and fifth years
Yeah.
rather than the first years, but setting the standard in terms of this is how you work. This is the preparation that you go through. And the fact that exactly like you said, you've got two quarterbacks that set records at Carleton. You don't get that without great quarterback play and phenomenal receivers catching the ball regardless. I had a chance to talk to Fred when I was out at the regional combine as well. And I was asking him, like, from a receiver standpoint, what does this mean to you? And he goes, honestly, at a certain point, you just say, I'm going to put my head down. Whoever throws me the ball, the moment that ball's in the air, it's mine. So I'm going to go get it. I don't care who threw it. And that mentality as a receiver fires me up to
Yeah.
hear that. And I did talk to Fred and said, hey, selfishly, very selfishly, I hope you're back with Carleton next year because I want to see you play for another year. So
Yeah.
I'm right with you there, Coach. I'm talking with Fred, but yeah, just an incredible young man, an incredible core, ultimately.
Yeah, and so go ahead. Yeah, and I'm with you with that piece, and I love this because I love this talking right now. We're in March, and we're going to talk about our receiving core, and then when we start in August, we're just going to be a full run team, full house backfield, and we'll be okay. So teams can prepare for that too. They could, prepare for the passing game because we're going to throw the ball around, and then when we show up with a full house backfield, we'll be all right. Catch them off guard.
Hey, yeah, with Matthew Morin running, Ethan Roca, Joey Marcotte, if he is back as well, would love to see a run game really get going here. But talking about some of the other older guys that also left, obviously, well, Zach and I are both former offensive linemen. Can't talk about Patrick Lavoie and what he meant to this team. And then going into this season, losing one of the best left tackles that there is in youth sports and what that offensive line was doing and putting together. And like you mentioned, it is worth noting that this is not just the second best passing game in OUA, it's the second best passing game in all of youth sports. Okay. So to get both guys with enough time so that they can find the receivers down the field, that offensive line really playing well despite losing Lavoie and just kind of rounding it out as an entire offense, this team really performed well, especially in the passing attack, which is, again, so impressive because there's two quarterbacks going back and forth in here.
Yeah, definitely. And, and we're talking about it now. It starts up front, right? Mm-hmm. And I always tell the guys, it's going to take all 12 of us to protect, right? So if a team wants to be a heavy blitz team, we got to know who our hots are. The O-line's got to make sure they're communicating well. The quarterback knows where he's supposed to go with the ball. All those things work, and the running back needs to know who they have. So it all works together, but it does start up front with the O-line and doing those things. I know everybody's always talking about, the run game and stuff like that. And I think I would say this is, do we got to get better at it? 100%. But games also dictate what you got to do and how you're going to call a game or play a game, right? If I use the Panda as an example, one of the things is I think we ran more than we threw that game.
Mhm.
Right. And it just happened, the nature of the game, how close it was in doing those things. We were able to, we ran the ball more than we had thrown the ball. Other games, I think the Matt game, obviously, we had thrown the ball around the park and doing those things because it just asked what the game asked for. So, but it does start up front. And our kudos to our O line and our O line coaches for getting those guys into position to, know the calls, know what we're doing, and being on the same page. I believe I was told our starting five O linemen from last year played every single game and they started every single game together, right? So that continuity actually helps, right? They practiced all year together and then they played and started every single game together, which actually helps that continuity, and they know each other, they know their calls, and they know, where they got to go and what they got to do.
Mhm.
Well, and you alluded to the age-old wisdom, styles make fights, and we were just talking about the Calgary Dinos last week, and very vaunting. Well, looking at their very vaunted passing attack, and having that similar thought of like, well, yeah, could you become a more well-rounded offense? Sure, but also if the other team can't keep up with your scoring as a result of your passing attack, I mean, you don't fix if it ain't broke.
Yeah.
But on the point of the rushing attack, because that was a piece where like through Tristan's time as kind of the guy, then going into the injury riddled year, and with Elijah taking over, then back and forth last year in the competition, like the passing game under your time at Carleton has been terrific. And it's really like going back to like the days of like with Nathan Carter and Joshua Ferguson, where it was really like also this run game that really had to be feared. And you already mentioned some of those names in guys like Joey Marcotte and Ethan Roca and Keyshawn Reed, who's obviously such a
Yeah.
great weapon wherever you can use him. And so I'm curious, you mentioned that full house backfield. I don't know how much of that's just to get us like overly excited, because now I'm of course picturing it being Elijah taking those snaps and how athletic he is.
Yeah.
But it'd be remiss in the context of just talking about the run game in general. I love your returning, or that you had a five group O line group that was all together last year, but the possibility of maybe losing an Aiden Arnett Smith. I mean, I don't know in terms of his eligibility, but he's getting up there. Knowing you have a younger fullback in Arthur Bedard, getting a couple reps in last year, because that's obviously what unlocks so much of what teams can do in the rushing attack. Obviously, that passing attack, when it's such a threat, is one of those things where you can say, okay, well, then if you don't want to load the box, just watch what we can do to you regardless. And that's a great way to help, make the run game that much more effective. Not knowing Arnett Smith's full eligibility piece, but knowing he's getting up there, maybe you're just going to look at me and be like, no, it's known he is back. And obviously you don't have to say anything that's, not worth saying on a public podcast in March. But how much does that work in as well with what you're able to do on the ground or in the air as well? That sort of much like an O-line can be undervalued until you really need them, is that fullback H-back position.
Yeah, that's definitely doing that. Yeah, Aiden's done. Yeah, he's done. He's moved on and doing that piece. That's not a big secret here. Arthur, he was a true tailback. He's one of the strongest guys on the team. So he had to come in and learn that position last year. And now watching him in winter, he's going to be a force, whether he's running the ball, blocking, and doing those things. Coming from CJEP, he was straight, give me the ball downhill. We run a different offense of where we have our H-back split out sometimes. He's got to go for a pass, line up as a tight end, be a tailback, and doing those different things like we did with Aiden. So he learned from somebody that was really, invaluable. Like Aiden, last year, I was so proud of him. He scored his first touchdown. He had one of the best seasons he's had since he's been a Raven and doing that stuff. So I was so happy for him. So yeah, with Arthur coming in, that'll be great. Recruiting some other H-backs that can come in so we can be a more balanced attack. I know you guys, mentioned Joey. He's not with us anymore, so he's moved on and did that piece. But yeah, we got Keyshawn Reed, who's not only a great returner, but great in the backfield. Matt Moran is back for one last kick at the can here as one of those older veteran guys coming in. So, and then we got some young guys coming in, Jeremiah Hay, who was, and Josh Downey and a few more. We got a full stable of guys that we'll have to, learn, right? And then really what we do and doing those things. But we do have some guys back there. But yeah, we're not that team like you would say, like, I don't know, like a Queens or a Western where we got those big rolly backs that we're just going to but we do have guys that complement what we do and can carry the rock 30 times if we need to, or, go out and pass. But the biggest thing for me is with our backs is to making sure that they can protect the quarterback, right? That's important too. And then making sure the coach has done a really good job recruiting guys to bring in another set of H backs that can come in and help us and help with our running game and help with our protection. So we're excited about those guys coming in, and I'm excited to see Arthur grow, right? That one more step this year. In his football knowledge of what we're doing, what we're asking him to do, and really getting out of that comfort zone, right? Really comfortable being split out or lining up at tight end and doing those things. Aiden came from an O-line background and then moved to running back, where Arthur has to sort of go the opposite way, like was a true tailback. Now we're moving into that H-back that's going to be doing multiple things. So I'm excited to see his growth. I was excited last year to see it, and then excited to see him grow, and then watching some new guys come in and learn from him.
Well, certainly as somebody, obviously, as you can tell behind me, who played at McMaster, if there's one thing that I can talk about, it's the importance of having a quality H-back. And back in my day was Declan Cross, arguably the best H-back that I can remember, at least in the 2010s, goes on to have a great CFL career. But with his play at such a high level, it opened up the offense in a way that it wasn't the same when he left, when he went to the CFL. So if Arthur can be your version of Declan, I think the entirety of your offense can completely explode in what you're able to do and grow from there. Now, obviously, getting a guy like Coach Griffiths in there to be your offensive coordinator, a great person, hell of a recruiter, and just a great dude. I would say between your two coordinators, nobody had it worse than Coach Hilaire, not because you didn't have a good defense, but because the amount of injuries that you guys were dealing with, especially in that back end. I mean, what happened to Schneider Cave was terrible. Obviously, LJ Dagamudo dealing with some stuff. You got a bunch of things that are happening across the board. Chris Dupin, I believe, was dealing with something as well. You've got a ton of injuries on that defense, and despite the fact of having a new defensive coordinator with potentially a brand new system, you've got guys that seem to be dropping like flies in certain areas. Talk a little bit about the resiliency, first off, of the guys, and certainly probably one of, if not our favorite Raven this year, in Xavier Malone. What he was doing on that defense, he was unbelievable, along with all of the other injuries that were happening.
Yeah, like like a guy like sort of Nate Clark,
Yeah.
right? Our interior guy, big time, right? Isaiah Joseph went down. So you got a new system. My dear to my heart is Xavier and then Anthony Lucan, right? Lucan came back from a back injury, back surgery, played a few games, and then got injured. And then you're sort of relying on some of those guys to help out as you bring in a new coordinator and new systems, right? Because you want the older guys in there and understanding what to do. So that was big, right? Losing a lot of those guys for any amount of games and stuff like that. And that did hurt us in the end, but it also gave us, looking forward, guys that didn't get a chance to play. Now, can we replace Xavier? No.
No.
Right? No. He was just special, right? Nate Clark in there, special. Those guys, and it's not even their football and their football knowledge and the experience of playing is one thing, but it's also just that leadership is humongous for a coach. And then even for, Ron coming in and putting in his new system, he's got a great staff with him, but it is that leadership on the field, that understanding of what we're doing and doing those things. Sometimes with those older guys, it clicks a little bit faster than when you have those younger guys going in. And then a lot of times what happens is, even when the younger guys go in, they're still thinking like, okay, you know what? I can hold them off because Nate's going to come back. Nate Clark's going to come back. And then he doesn't. Or Tupan, he broke his arm. Or when you're waiting for Cave to come back, you get him in there, you get him for one game, a half a game, and then he's gone. And now you're trying to replace him for the rest of the year because that's just a different talent. And same thing with L. James, right? And that's why those guys have been looked at by the CFL and doing those things. But, in the end, it's the next man up mentality that we have. We need those guys to step up and perform, and they did it to the best of their abilities with all the different changes that we had. So we're hoping this year, with all that learning, we can't replace them per se of who they are, but we can make sure we have our guys ready and prepared to know what we need to do and hopefully build us a better system.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say before I hand it off to you, Zach, I know we've talked about this before. How? How does Xavier Malone not get a first team OUA All Star? 62 total tackles, 4 sacks. Like the stats that he has, like Zach and I are looking at this being like, oh, should he probably be like fighting for all Canadian status, let alone first team on the freaking OUA. So I don't want to get you into trouble by putting anybody else down or whatever else. Yeah. But we thought that was nuts. And Xavier, if you're listening to this, you should have been at least an OUA first team All-Star, if not a U Sports All-Canadian.
Yeah, and I will say this, right? And as a coach, you're always fighting for your guys, and we have other guys that we thought should have been, and it is what it is. But the thing was, when I heard about Xavier, and I was like, I felt bad for him. And it just talks to the person that he is. And he goes, Coach, I'm happy to be a second team. Like, I'm a second team OUA. Like, he wasn't before. It was like, Coach, it's okay. Like, he was so, and it's nothing to not be proud of. Mm-hmm. Like you're saying, we're thinking he's all Canadian. We thinking he's this, that. And he was just ecstatic that he was a second team OUA, that he's like, it's fine. Coach, I'm okay. Like, so that just was like, you know what? I said, if you're okay with it, well, shoot, we're going to Hamilton. We're going to go celebrate and we'll go do that. And I'm happy for you so that just told me, that said enough about it. That's what I'm going to miss about him. So when I see him hanging out in the locker room right now and I grab him and I hug him, I'm just like, oh, we can't get you one more year and stuff like that. But that's just the type of character he is. He's like, it doesn't matter. Like, I was an all-star. I was a second team all-star and I'm happy. And I was like, if you're happy, then I'm happy, and we're not worried about the rest of it then.
Well, it's a great mentality to have, and I love hearing that from the young athletes that are playing the sport right now. And just to highlight a few more of those guys, when you talk about the next man up mentality, where especially when we talk about Al James, I mean, I think was it all of 24 he missed pretty much, and then he's a bit on and off. Like, it's an unfortunate, like, the injuries he's been dealing with, and obviously we talked about Tupen, talked about Schneider, but with that, and specifically in the back end, how that gives way for guys like Jake Henderson, and then Megawatt Nia Rajaro to really step up. Hopefully I did half decently on that. I mean, with a name like Megawatt, you obviously can all just stick with the first name.
Yeah. Sorry? You'll be fine. I just call him Megawatt and we're good to go.
We're good to go.
Yeah.
And no doubt other guys as well. I mean, certainly thinking about the Burke boys possibly moving on from that front line. You mentioned a guy like Isaiah Joseph stepping up big, but really just looking at how with the injuries that riddled that linebacking into secondary core, how guys like Megawatt and Henderson stepped up big for you this year to really hold it down. I mean, obviously, we could talk a bit about that UFT game, what happened at the start of the year, but you always want to finish better than you started. So, rough start to it, injuries, new DCs, all that kind of stuff. But really just highlighting how those two guys stepped up big in the midst of all those injuries.
Yeah, it was great. Like, Jake's one of our leaders on our team. Mega's been there and doing those things, right? So it gives those guys to really a chance to shine and to step up, not only on the field, but in their leadership off the field and those expectations from them. A guy like Justin Belanger, who's very, a quiet young man, but he comes in, he does his work, he does what he has to do, right? Learning from X and at that linebacking core and doing those things, has cut his teeth on special teams. Andrew Christie's doing the same thing. They've been doing that. Now it's their time to step up and shine and to, step into those roles, not only as leaders off the field, but, their play on the field, right? And we're putting that sort of that pressure and that expectation on them that, hey, now it's your time. You've seen what it takes. Now it's your time to step into that spotlight. So I'm excited to see, I've been seeing them throughout the winter and the spring and training camp, spring camp, but then actually seeing them develop more over the summer and then developing into what we're going to be and what they're going to be come August and lead our young guys coming in. But I'm excited for it. And, like a guy like Ryan Grant that's been there and been playing on specials in the back end and had spot duty. Now it's, hey, Ryan, now let's step up and let's get things going. So I'm excited for those guys to, really start to, hey, take ownership of that and take ownership of the defense as another year in it and start to really shine.
Yeah, I think it's such a testament to, for the folks who listen to us pretty regularly here, we are pretty confident. Well, we are constantly saying, we want Carleton to take that next step, get into the playoffs, get and start winning. And I think it's a massive testament to the talent that you guys have, that despite the fact that you had two quarterbacks battling it out and having that, I don't want to say inconsistency, but just having that between the two of them, with all of the injuries that you were dealing with key guys. Not to say that not everybody who's starting is a key guy, but your top tier talent on your defense, and still being just 2 points away in a final game to making the playoffs here, despite all of that, just showcases the talent that's within the locker room here with the Ravens. And we are so excited for what that 26th season kind of brings. Now, speaking on the future, obviously here, when we first, or the last time that we spoke to you, I believe it was a couple of years ago, you were still somewhat freshly in the role and understanding things, whatever else. But now, through our own research of going out and about and trying to understand, Zach and I will constantly talk about the best football factories in Hamilton. No, it's in Toronto or it's in London. We had somebody come up to us a little while ago and say, no, the bar none best football town in all of Canada is Ottawa. Mm-hmm. And you've got Carleton and you've got Ottawa there. And then obviously you've got the RSEQ that likes to try to pick guys. But the number of guys that we've been told that are just going down south, that are just, there's a constant pipeline that's going down there. What is that, the hub of recruiting in Ottawa look like? And with all of those seemingly hands that are in there trying to poke the guys and pick the guys that are in your backyard?
Yeah, it's tough, right? I think I got the best recruiting crew, bar none, with Alex Lothian, and then Nate coming and Ron helping with there. Coach Matt, Coach Tunde's great at it, and just my whole staff involved. But those guys are just working hard, right? And it is tough in Ottawa, right? With the two universities, we have certain things that Ottawa doesn't have. They have certain things that attract people, and doing that, and then it's everybody else trying to go to prep school, right? And then, so many, I don't like how many guys are probably in the NFL draft or been at the combines that's from Ottawa that's going to get drafted this year, right? So there's always that thing of guys wanting to go down south. And then, because so many guys from here have gotten down a chance at NCAA big time schools and getting into the NFL, right? It's tough, right? And it's all about, we just talk about building relationships. Right. I think it's building relationships in the community through our Junior Ravens programs, getting out to the high schools, letting them know what we have here at Carleton, what we're trying to build, and having those kids be a sort of a building part of that foundation and doing those things. I think that's really important for us to get out there. And sometimes now we've been dipping our toe more into Quebec and doing that. And when I first started, nobody knew what that logo meant or anything like that. But now they're starting to get a better understanding of that. We've had some kids come in from CJEPS and help us immediately, right? And, with Coach Ron there too, helping out, and Coach Alex, they've been over there and they've been doing a good job of that. So there is a ton of guys here. There's a ton of people coming in. The school, not just across the river, but down the highway from us, they stick their noses up in here too, and they get some kids out and stuff like that, which we battle to make sure that our kids here know it's okay to stay at home. You get a chance to play in front of your crowd, you get a chance to play in your front family and friends, be a part of the community, give back to your community, go and coach your Myers teams, your Cumberland teams, Canada, Bel Air, all those different places, or go back to your high school and coach. So it's tough and it's a battle, but we enjoy that part. That's also part of it too, right? Building up your program and making sure kids want to be here, and knowing that, coming to Carleton, we'll get them to where they want to be, whether it's that academic piece, going on to be a professional there, or going on to play in the CFL, or doing those different things, or just, understanding what our old Crows do and what that program looks like, and doing that piece. We say once a Raven, always a Raven. So recruiting is tough in here. It is. I think it is the hub. I've lived in Hamilton, and I saw that and how football works around here in the Golden Horseshoe, but also up in Ottawa and that region too. It's some really, really top level football players, and we're doing our best to get as many of them to come to become a Raven and be a Raven for life.
Well, I think this came up when we last got to talk a few years ago, but time of recording, they're coming off of winning their 18th national title. You also have in your building one of the best youth sports men's basketball programs, and the women's program is no slouch either. But in all of youth sports history, whether it's under the leadership of Coach Charles or, of course, under Coach Smart when he was there, how does that impact you as a recruiter, as a coach in the football space? Is it impactful in any way, in any component of your duties there? Like I could see it going in so many ways. What's your lived experience being, I say as in no shot to the football program, just anyone at Carleton of sports or anything living under the shadows of Ravens hoops, because that is certainly how stuff I would imagine goes at that university, regardless of what space you occupy.
Yeah, it's one of those things for me. It's everybody wants to be around a winner, right? And that's what our basketball programs do, right? And that's when people are saying, well, what about here? And they have this and that. Well, guess what? Our athletic department has committed to winning, right? Is committing to building championships and doing that stuff, as you could tell by our basketball programs, right? And it's no different with our football program. It's what do you need, coach? What can we do to help? How can we help? How do we do that? And that stuff is infectious, right? Like we go out to the basketball games, we go out to our soccer games, we go out to those and support our other varsity teams because winning is contagious. So when I see our basketball team and them shooting in the summer and working in the off season to go get a championship just a couple weeks ago, I let our guys know that's what it takes to be a champion. That's the stuff that it takes. And it's not just once in a while, it's an all the time thing, right? If you want your name on the wall of champions and having that, that's what it takes. They're up early, they're out there late, they're doing those things, no different than our guys do now. But there's just there's an aura about them and a feel about them that we get to see daily from our basketball program, and and they walk down the hall and we're at the opposite end of the hall and we're like, shoot, we got to get this end of the hall to match that far end of the hall, right? So it is good, and I get to pick our basketball coaches' brains, and I sit in and watch practice and how they interact with the players, and I poke my head in doing that, because it is, you want to pick up different things. And sometimes as coaches we might go to different clinics or listen to different podcasts or listen, like who was on Coach Krzyzewski. I can't say his name, I'm gonna mess it up.
Coach K. That's why it's
Coach K, right? I was listening to him on a podcast the other day about championships and Team USA and Duke and all that. And I'm like, I got champions right down the hall. I can sit in meetings. I can watch how they practice. I can see how they do it. I can see our women's basketball, how they do it. I can see how our men's team do it. I have that right in there. I can see how they interact with the players and do those things. And I can pick that up right firsthand. I'll walk over and, okay, what if we're doing this? Okay, you're the top dog. How are you going to react when a team that's you're supposed to beat comes in, and doing those? And I can have those candid conversations, and our guys can see that, and I can actually bring that into our locker room right there and then, and watching that lived experience. And our guys get out to basketball games and they can see the intensity of the coaches, they can see the intensity of the players, and they can say, okay, that's what it takes to win a championship, and go from there. And even with our men's team this year, I think they had some of their top players hurt going into the championship game. It was the next person up and they won, right? There was no excuses. I know I talked to Coach Taff, with winning any championship, and any coach would say, it doesn't matter what sport, right? You got to have a little bit of luck here, a couple good bounces here and doing those things. But overall, your hard work is what really gives you a lot of that. And they get to see that. I get to see that, and the guys get to see that. And they're like, okay, this is in our building and this is the standard. This is what it's going to take for us to go do those things. Is it going to happen overnight? No, but they've been doing it for so many years. We know that there's a process to do it for both programs, and we try and emulate that as quickly as best that we can within the football realm. But listen, winning's contagious, and how they walk the winning life every single day, and I enjoy watching it.
Well, I'll just add in quickly. I was lucky enough to spend a Saturday afternoon and evening a couple weeks back watching the doubleheader of TMU hosting the men's and women's championships and coming victorious against Carleton, which is obviously huge to be able to see them there with my buddy, and like we're kind of reveling and being like, wow, Carleton basketball, gets knocked off. And I'm like, yeah, but Carleton basketball, they don't play for Wilson Cups anymore. Like, let's see if TMU can do it again. And obviously they got to do the head-to-head again in the quarters or semis, and Carleton came out on top on their way to winning a championship. Didn't matter. They were 6th seeded going into that national Elite Eight or whatever they call it. It's just like, that's amazing. I was happy to see TMU pull off the win for the Wilson, but we know where this ends and we know what that's going to involve. And obviously, yeah, there would have been some on taking for them to do it twice. But
Yeah, yeah, and that's right, and that's just that mindset. Okay, we're going to see them again. We're playing for national championships, all of those things, and not saying that they weren't trying to win those both teams and stuff like that, but it's just that mindset, right? It's that winner's mindset. Okay, we're playing for something bigger. Like we got to lock in and do those things, and we're going to get everybody's best. So even with our women's team, with such a young team, to go as far as they did, like they're going to be knocking on the door again, right? And just watching how coaches build that, recruit, and asking those questions myself just down the hall going, okay, that's how it's done, and being able to see those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm happy that we brought up the basketball team here as well, because obviously you get a chance to just be around great teams. You see what a great championship culture looks like, and that's something that can bleed across no matter what kind of X's and O's you're doing, what kind of sports you're doing, or anything else. But I'm curious as well if you've taken any notes in just dealing with pressure just in general here. You've got the pressure of expectation for the basketball team. You've won so many times, so now the expectation is that you're going to win again and again and again. And obviously we talked about just a little while ago here how talented your team is and how all the pieces in there. Now obviously injuries happen and stuff happens during the season and everything else. But you as the head coach, you've got 2 new coordinators coming in. You've got what should be a really talented team here. And then obviously it ends up at 3-5, and there's so much pressure around just winning and that culture and everything else. How do you personally deal with the pressures that come with being the head man of a great university and a great program like the Carleton Ravens?
Yeah, it's one of those things. You keep everything in perspective, right? You don't go, I'm not trying to be too far here or, too high, too low. Keeping everything, believe in the process and the foundations from my mentors and those that before. And, I've been part of winning teams and what that is, and understanding myself at times. It's not going to just happen overnight, right? You want to every year take a step, right? You want to keep building and saying, okay, this is the foundation. Trying not to be so nearsighted, right? There is a bigger picture of how we're getting to there and what we're doing, and just believing in that process. But also, as myself as the head coach, not being afraid to pivot, right? And saying, not being, oh, we got to do it this way and this is the way it is. Okay, then, you know what? That didn't work. Let's see if we can pivot to this, right? And doing those different things. So yeah, the pressure's there to win. I want to win. I got the pressure on myself. Like, shoot, I want to win. And winning the Panda was one thing, but the coach is like, oh, that's great, we won the Panda. I'm like, okay, well, we got to go play Laurier that following Friday, right? I want to get in the playoffs and doing those things. But also, my wife would say too, also, and would be like, you know what? You've worked that hard. Don't just overlook it. Like, the Panda and winning. Winning is tough. And I tell my guys that after every win, winning is tough. Nothing's given to us. It is tough to enjoy that also. Right. And then how did it feel what did it take to get there? Don't take your foot off the gas pedal, but keep pushing, right? And believe in your process and your processes that you have on, and believe in your vision and what you're doing. Not be so locked in that you're not afraid to pivot if something's not going that way, and doing those things. But I just take it day by day. I look at it. What's the culture that we're building? Are our guys getting bigger? Are they getting stronger? Are they graduating? Right? Keeping that whole thing in perspective, taking the little wins day by day. Hey, less guys, I'm not in the building, but are they still going to workouts? Is our leadership group, are they still leading and doing those things? So yeah, there's a big pressure with the basketball team, and like I said, the whole building, and that's part of football, and that's why I love it. I love the part of the recruiting and all of those different things. So myself, I just make sure keep my feet where they are. Keep 10 toes down, keep my eye on the bigger prize, make sure we're lined up with the process. The guys know, and make sure I'm communicating that to the coaches and letting them know, giving them a chance to do their job, putting up some pressure on them, make sure they're doing a good job on that too, and doing that piece. And then just keeping an eye to the bigger picture, right? We are trying to and doesn't matter. This sport is such a big sport, and making sure with the young men that we are coaching that, you know what, we're making them better men,
Mhm.
right? And making sure that they're better leaders and doing that piece. Yes, the winning and the losing, you know, we are playing a sport and we are taking check marks of, you know, you got to win football games. That's all good. But also just for myself, making sure of that bigger piece of we're developing these young men to be better human beings and better leaders tomorrow.
Coach, last thing I want to ask you about, and it kind of ties in with that theme of big picture, but less so in the big picture of just the athletes' lives, more so big picture of the 2026 season. You know, this is a very fascinating year that we're stepping into, and we're only midway through March at time of recording right now, where you look at a team in Laurier where by recent reports, Cal Weathers heading back south of the border. You have a Western Mustangs team that is obviously has Evan Hillock moving on. It's a really young defense, some new faces in around that program. Keegan Hall finally handed them up. A lot of youth around the league, but a year where for so long, Tom and I have been talking about how if you took off the top team or sometimes two teams that were just really world beaters in the OUA, and maybe you take out the bottom team or sometimes bottom two teams that really were just struggling to pick up even a win, that middle class of the OUA is so strong. But it feels like going into this year, not that there still aren't teams that do some things better than any other team in certain areas. And, you know, we've talked about certain areas of your own club, at least in recent years, things like that receiving core being right up there and that passing attack as a whole being as good as any one thing that other teams do. But it feels like in many ways we're going into OUA season where in part with Queens knocking off Laurier and that kind of, I think, throwing off a lot of people's feel for what's going on around the league. It very much feels like open competition, 1 through 11, arguably. During my time at Guelph, the sort of yearly catch-all motivating sort of words were things like plant the flag or go beyond, things like that sort of encapsulated who we thought we were as a team and what we were trying to sort of accomplish in the big picture for that year. Whether it takes into account the landscape of the OUA, because at the end of the day, you can only control what you control in your building and you play who the other teams put across from you. What is that big picture? Here's every day when you step into the building, I want you to remember these words and everything you do is in accordance with these values, while also thinking that, man, oh man, if there is a year for the things to click, this could be a really, really awesome year for your Carleton Ravens to take advantage of an OUA that looks ready for potentially a new face to reign atop the league.
Yeah, we let that happen throughout training camp, right? Like right now, we're where we're at, right? And I don't hide from it. Like our record was we didn't make the playoffs last year, right? So we're trying to scratch to make sure we're preparing ourselves to go win our first game and get into the playoffs. And as you just mentioned, right, the OUA is going to be so tight this year, right? I still think Western's going to be Western. That doesn't matter. Laurie's going to be Todd's going to do a good job over there. You know, Guelph is there. We haven't played Windsor in a few years, but we watch them. They're very good, right? They're a good football team and stuff like that. And Queens is just going to reload and get going again, right? And Ottawa U's been good. So every team is going to be good. You're going to have to be on your P's and Q's every week, every single week, and doing that piece. Really, right now, I don't have anything for like every year we go in with whatever our saying is going to be. It usually develops throughout training camp because that becomes that motto for the team. Last year it was earn everything. As we went in, like nobody was going to give us anything. We were going to have to earn everything, right? And that was that one for last year, and it held us well. That was our big thing. I don't know what it'll be this year. I know we're just working our butts off right now. Really, like one of the things, even in our off season, we talk about, you know, no deposit, no return, right? So we got to put our deposits in right now to get our return out in the backside of things, right? So we got to make sure we're hitting the gym, getting in our playbooks, understanding our systems, doing the little things that you can in the off season. I know I talked to other coaches, right, in other sports, and we have the longest off season for the shortest season, right? But you know, keeping the guys motivated for that and doing different things. But yeah, where we're gonna land, we'll figure out that come the season. We could end up anywhere, like you said, we could end up from first to 11th, right? Just because it is going to be tight across the. I don't think there's any gimme games across the OUA coming into this fall. Just what you said, I think the COVID groups are gone now. and
Hmm.
that older group. So it is that next generation of kids that are coming in that will start to piece things together, and those teams will do that. And I'm sure all the coaches are doing all that with the recruiting pieces. So it'll be interesting to see where things fall that way. And I think for us, we would just, like you said, we're going to focus on ourselves there. And yeah, we'll go from there. Like I said, we didn't get in the playoffs. We were one
Hmm.
of the teams outside looking in. It didn't matter how close we were, and we could say our 3 and 5 tied two other teams that got in. We didn't get in, right? And
Hmm.
we haven't been in a couple of years, so our focus has got to be take care of our own business, and wherever we fall, we'll take that. But our job is to get into the, win our first game, win as many games as we can to get into position ourselves to get into the playoffs, and be playing whether late into November or at least
Hmm.
get November.
Hmm. Well, like you said, at the end of the day, you didn't make it into the playoffs. It is what it is. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that last game against McMaster had me sweating bullets for my Marauders. What you guys are doing there, man.
Yeah.
Holy crap. I mean, Elijah goes off for 500. Reddy alone has 200 yards catching. Like,
Yeah.
unbelievable in that last game. So, obviously,
And then
you
to
know,
block the field goal and then run into to block
oh
the
my
field goal to run into the
God.
kicker.
Oh,
When I see I forget the head ref there, I will, as a head coach, you can't call that. Then you watch it on film. They barely almost killed him. But you're just like you do everything, you block it, and then
yeah.
you're thinking, all right, you got a chance. And then, they kick it, and when you're just like you're not expecting the best kicker in the league to miss, and then, but it is what it is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, you know, we we talk about a lot about how important it is for people to just be able to look back and to understand, the work that you did. And exactly like you were saying, it's hard to win in the OUA. Be proud of every win that you have, but understand where you're trying to get to, where your ultimate goal is. You need to win a number of those games in order to host the championship. And it's never an easy call out here, but it's something that I'd never take for granted myself, and getting the chance to speak to great men and great people in this space. And you were certainly one of them with some of the work that you've done, making my university better when you were there, both on the football field and outside of that as well. And obviously doing similar things with Carleton and the culture that you're instilling and everything else that you're doing there. So first and foremost, I just wanted to say we're a fan of you, and we're a fan of the work that you do, whether you're with the Ravens, with my Marauders, or anywhere else that you're going in. So I wanted to make sure that I said that before I pass it back to Zach to end things off. But like I said, we talked a number of times about some younger guys that had to step up in key scenarios because of injuries and that. Who are some of these young players going into 2026 that may not be on the radar, but for people to just start looking out for? Hey, you got a guy here, you got a dog here who's really looking to step in.
So now you're gonna make me put pressure on these guys, right? Now I'm gonna put pressure on them. I love it. No, I think for us, shoot, we got a kicking battle going on,
Mm-hmm.
because we're gonna have new kickers going on there. So I'll put a little bit of pressure on the kickers and doing that piece. As usual, we've been having our quarterback battle all winter. I know everybody will be watching to see where that goes and stuff like that, which will be fine. Like I told you, we're a full house team anyway, so it doesn't matter who's back there. But we do have some guys that, I know you guys mentioned Dante,
Mm-hmm.
Spadaccini, Arthur will be there. Keyshawn was a great returner last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was the best in the OUA, but I'll leave it at that. Um, so Keyshawn, looking for him to take that next step as a running back and doing those things. We said Nash McDonald, right? He's made some spectacular. It's twice he's been on TSN.
Mm-hmm.
What you call it, plays of the year or whatever for
Mm-hmm.
TSN. He was that in high school and then one here. So excited to see him come together and do those things. Jake Henderson, our O line, like sure, we got Jordan Musa up front, and he's not young, but when they talk about O line and somebody playing center a lot, like you guys do, you talk about the tackles and you'll talk
Mm-hmm.
about Jed or John Grease, but that guy that's anchoring it down in the middle is going to be really important. So, and then on defense, I think one of the guys I'm going to put it on him right now because I know what's going to happen in a couple of weeks here is Justin Belanger. right? He's got to come in and he's got to fill the shoes of X, right? So I'm excited to see his growth and what he does. And then, like we said, Jake Henderson, it should be that time for him to shine and do those things. So we got a plethora of young guys coming in. DeAndre McKenzie should step up. And if we're lucky enough to get Brody Burke back, we'll take him. If he ends up going to the if he ends up going to the CFL, we'll wish him all the best, but I'll always take him back. And I think one guy who I will say that he's going to be a good player. He's going to be a good player, and I put Jordan Malenda. I don't think anybody's heard of him in a bit. Jordan's going to be a special player on that defensive side of the ball. As you're going through and looking through who's that next guy or those guys to look at, and I don't mind putting it out there on him. He's going to be a good defensive player, and he's already a good leader in our locker room. He's learned from some of the best of Ife, and then he was got to work with Isaiah and then Tucker last year. I think he'll be another guy to add to our defensive line that teams are going to be like, oh, where did he come from? So he played a little bit last year and doing that on special teams, but I think he's going to be that guy that really step up. So I'm excited for all the guys. I'm excited for all of our guys, right? I know we're always looking for names and stuff like that, but and there's going to be somebody else that's going to step up that right now could be a freshman coming in, could be one of the guys that are there that's going to step up and just be like and catch our eye in spring camp. Spring camp is doing that, but it's really going to catch our eye in August because they're going to get to grow over the summer and really take reins of things and take up. So I'm excited for our program, where we're at and where we're going. And I know it's March. Hopefully we can get the field cleaned off with the snow, and we get out there and get some practice in at the end of the month here and get them ready for exams, and then get ready for our summer and get this. I don't want August to start too soon. I do want to enjoy my summer. I do want to do all of that, but then, get this season started and get things going again.
He's the head coach of the Carleton Ravens, Coach Corey Grant. Coach, it is always an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show, none more so than you were today. Thank you so much, as always. Best of luck in the offseason as it continues and going into the 2026 season.
Appreciate you guys. Appreciate doing this. Appreciate having me on. Respect everything that you guys do. And you're one for, are you supposed to be, what do you call it? You can't vote for either team or cheer for either team at Panda?
Nah, it's not a rule. It's not
a rule. Just checking.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have to bring you back then and see if it is you guys.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Coach. I believe our next stop in the exit meeting tour is sticking around Ontario. Well, it's either there or the Belle Province. So you'll have to tune in next week to find out right here at the 55.